Now, in the previous session, we saw what is EC2, that is exactly the elastic compute cloud through which how is that you're going to create a machine or an instance, and what is the different kind of purchasing options. That is what we were pretty much trying to understand and see. Now, when we created a particular EC2 instance, there were a lot of terms that we used, right? So let's try to understand that, because as I said, when you need to know the DevOps essentials, one of the important thing is, you need to understand the basic fundamentals and what is each terminology. So that's how with this later on, if you want to do some more advanced learning, then it will be quite easy for you to understand. So that way, now let's try to understand few of the concepts that we will be using in AWS. So if you recall again, I was using a term called as VPC. So what exactly is a VPC and why do we need it in AWS? So when you say VPC, VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. Okay, so what is exactly a Virtual Private Cloud? Now, a VPC is a private section of the AWS that will be under our control, that is as a user, using which we will be able to put all the resources and work accordingly. So just like how you're going to create a separate network in your organization, if you're creating an infrastructure or you're creating a data center, what you will do is you will put all the machines into a particular lab, and then you will be setting up a closed network within your organization, so that if anyone has to access within the organization, then they will be under that network, and only by that you will be able to access all the machines within the network, right? So the same way, now instead of having the physical machines, we are having the machines over the internet, that is on the AWS. So in the AWS, if you want to create a specific closed network, and that is what we call it as a VPC, where using the VPC, we will be trying to specify all the resources that we want to put. If you put it inside this VPC, and specifically it will be acting as a isolated environment, so that only if you want to work, you will be working within the IPC, and within the VPC, whatever the resources are there, we will be able to access. And you will be having a complete control over who can access the resources that you put inside a VPC. So that's exactly like how you're going to have a separate network for us within our organization in a data center or a lab. Similarly, VPC is nothing but a private network where if you put some resources inside it, then we will be having the control on who should be able to access and who should not be able to access. Okay, so that is how you can create a private network using this virtual private cloud. And using the VPC, we will be able to isolate all the resources that we have specifically, so that it will be acting as a separate network. Okay, and same thing, if you want to access anything using that resources, then you have to be inside that particular network or the VPC, and you will be able to use the resources. And when you are using the concept of VPC in the AWS, then we can control over the complete networking environment. Like if you understand deeper into the networking, you'll be having things like a specific IP address for a machine, and then you group certain things and create something called a subnet. So you can take care of that subnet, and then you'll also have something called as RT, or a routing table, or a gateway. All those things can be managed by us specific to this VPC. Again, all these terms are related to the networking, where if you are setting up a closed network for your organization, you have to set up all these things. The same way, when we are creating a VPC in the AWS, we can try to set up and configure all of them specific to our VPC. And that's what also we are going to see after this on what each and everything is. So specifically, when we create an account in AWS, by default, we will be assigned a separate VPC. So that is how we can choose what and all machines or the resources that I want to put inside it, and I can control completely on how it is going to be accessed. Okay, so VPC means it is nothing but a private network that you're going to have. So that's the reason we call it again as a virtual private cloud, because no one else from outside can access it without giving the proper access to it. So every time you create a account, what will happen? By default, there will be a specific VPC or a private network that will be assigned to this account, so that now you put any resources into this, then all of them will be under the closed network. Just like how we are going to set up a private network for our organization, and all the machines inside it will be accessible only if you are inside the network. Same way here, only if you connect to the AWS and when you go to the VPC, then all the machines within the VPC can be reached. Okay, so VPC means you can think about having a private network on our premises on the cloud. We call it as virtual private cloud or VPC. Now, how do we compare it? Now, let's take this diagram where each of our house will also be having a separate network connection, right? Because whenever that I have an internet at my home, then if I connect to a machine, then only if there is another machine inside my home, I'll be able to connect. So that is how each of our house acts as a private network. You cannot access a machine which is available on your neighbor's place, because that will be on a separate network. So how exactly the network works? So if you try to understand, the private network that you will be having in your house, which basically you will be having the internet, and from the internet you will be having the modem or DSL from which you will be routing the traffic, and further from the modem you will be passing the traffic to the router or the switch, using which you will be able to access. And from this router you will be going through the firewall, where you will be setting up what kind of rule that you want to access. For example, if you do not want to access certain websites, then you will be specifying all the rule on what and all you should not be able to access, that kind of blockage or the permissions that you can do it in the firewall. And then from the firewall we will be able to access exactly our computer that we have within the home. So that's how the data flow will happen from the internet to the modem, and from the modem to the specific router or the switch that we will be having, and from the switch we'll be having the specific firewall in our computer, and based on that, whatever machine that you want to access, you'll be able to accessing it. Okay, now the same thing, if you try to compare it with the AWS, you can see the difference. Only difference is, instead of our machine or instead of our home network, now we are going to have the virtual private cloud on the AWS, and in that, instead of the modem, we are going to have internet gateway. So try to compare. Instead of the modem, you are going to have the internet gateway. Same way, now instead of the switches or routers that you're going to have in our home or in our junction box, in AWS, specifically in the VPC, you're going to have something called as routing table. And then instead of having the firewall on our machines like how we have in our laptop or in our organization, in VPC, that is within the AWS, you're going to have something called as NACL or network access control and security groups. So this is going to replace our standard firewall. So in our machine or in the organization, you're going to use firewall, whereas if you go into the VPC on AWS, we are going to have something called as security group. And then further, instead of our physical machine or the machine in our lab in the company, you'll be having a particular EC2 instance, where this EC2 instance will be specific to a region. So the same data, if you are trying to access on a different availability zone that you have, which is nothing but a data center, same thing. From the internet, the data will flow to the internet gateway. From that, it will be going to something called as routing table. And from there, where exactly the machine is available, it will be routed to that. And in that, it will be going through certain rules, which is called as security group. And based on that, you'll be able to access the exact machine. Okay, so this is the difference on how our home network or our organization network will look like. The same thing, if you try to compare it with the AWS, This is the difference that you will be having. So the modem will be replaced with something called as internet gateway. The router or switch will be replaced by a terminology called as routing table, and then the firewall will be replaced with the security group and the NACL. And then instead of our physical machines, whatever that we have, we will be having a EC2 instance. And then if it is your organization, instead of the data center where the machine is available, we will be having the availability zone in AWS on which the machine will be exactly available. Okay. Now, let's try to understand each and every aspect that we were trying to understand here, because now we are just trying to compare with our home modem and other switches that we have, that is our home network. The same way we just saw how similar it is on the AWS on the VPC. Now let's try to understand each and everything that we have here so that it will be a little more better to know that. So the first thing that we saw is when the data flows from the internet, if it has to go inside our VPC that is on the AWS, then it has to go through something called as internet gateway. So internet gateway is actually a horizontally scaled or redundant and highly available component. What is the purpose of this? VPC is going to help us to communicate between different instances that we have within the network and to the internet. Okay, so now if you have an account and you are working inside a machine in the AWS that is on EC2, if any point of time, if you want to connect between two machines within the AWS or from the AWS to some other internet connection, or if you want to connect to the internet, then it will always go through the VPC only, wherein VPC is that component of the network which will help you to do that. And it is completely scaled and redundant, which means you can try to add more and more details to it. So that is how from your machine, if you want to connect to other machine, this is how it will go through. Okay, and then it will come. The same way, if you want to connect to the internet, then this is how it will be going, or this is how the data will be coming. So pretty much now either you have to connect between the machine or you have to connect from the internet to the machine. You will be using this internet gateway, which will be acting similar to what we have in our home network, which we call it as a modem. Okay. Now, when you are trying to create a VPC, okay, what will happen? Along with the VPC, this component called internet gateway will also be coming. So sometime back I said, whenever you are going to create an account, by default you will be getting a virtual private cloud, right? Now in that, along with the VPC, whatever that we have got default, you will also be getting the internet gateway as a component attached to it, because this is not something like what we are setting up our home network where you have to purchase everything or go to the internet service provider and ask him to give the modem. Here everything is available within the AWS and everything is virtual. So that's how when you create an account, you are going to get a specific VPC for you by default, and in that default VPC it will be already having a component called as internet gateway, which will be using, or it will be helping us to pretty much connect to different machines within the same group or connect to the internet and the machine. Okay. Now that way, if you have a VPC, in a VPC you can have only one internet gateway. So you cannot have multiple internet gateway. Just like in our home, if you want to connect to the internet, you need to have one specific modem through which you will be connecting to the service provider, right? You cannot say that, hey, at my home I have one modem which will be used for Airtel, and the same modem I can be attaching it, for one more service provider. No, pretty much for one service provider you're going to have a specific modem. Same way, for one virtual private cloud you're going to have one component called as internet gateway in the VPC. Okay, then if you have an internet gateway attached to a VPC, then we cannot remove the internet gateway from a VPC while we have some resources which is being used. Now compare it with our home. It is not like our home where, let's say I am trying to connect to internet. Let's say I'm having the Airtel connection and I'm trying to connect it using my modem. Now pretty much in our home I can just remove that modem, by which we will not be working on it. But in the concept of VPC, when you have a machine which you are working, then how you are going to work between the machine? It is using the internet gateway, right? So that way, when a resource is being using a VPC, then you cannot remove or you cannot detach a particular internet gateway from it. So remember, internet gateway will be attached to the VPC, and using only that you will be communicating. So when actually a resource is actively being used, then you cannot detach a particular internet gateway. Okay. Now, without the VPC, the resources cannot talk to each other, but they can access. So what you mean here is, when, let's say, you have a virtual private network. Now, in case if you do not have a private network, then the machines, whatever that you have, can actually communicate between each other, but it cannot communicate to the internet, because in order to communicate to the internet, you need to have the internet gateway which is attached to the VPC. Just like if in your home, if you have two machines, you can set up a network between your two machines, where if you want to connect between your two machines, you can connect. But the only difference is, if you have the modem and the internet is connected, then from that machine you will be able to connect to the internet. If not, you will not be able to connect to the internet. The same way here, if in your account you are detaching a particular VPC, let's say you are not creating the VPC at all, then all the machines that you have created in your account can talk to each other, because everything is within AWS. But from that machine, now when you are within the AWS, where if there is no VPC, then you can connect between the machines, but from that machine you cannot connect to the internet. So that is how only with VPC, with the help of the internet gateway, you will be able to communicate to the internet. But other than that, you can communicate between the machine. Okay, so that is why internet gateway is important, because if you want to connect from your machine to the internet, this should be the component as part of your VPC. Okay, so now when you say internet gateway, it is that component which will be part of your network. Only through that you will be able to communicate between two machines on the internet, or between the machine and accessing the internet. Okay, the next thing we saw was route table, right? RT. So RT stands for route table or routing table. So what exactly is the routing table? So a routing table is actually a set of rules. Okay, so we can also call it as a route. Route means how you should go, right? So that is what we call it as a route, or it is nothing but a set of rule using which we will be able to determine where the network traffic is directed. Now, what do you mean by where the network traffic is directed? So if you say connect to this machine, how does it know exactly to connect to that machine? Because every machine will have an IP address, right? And that IP addresses will be available in the table, and also how is that you should be connecting and what should be connecting. So based on that, you will be able to connect to the specific machine. So that is how, when a request or a traffic comes from the internet through the internet gateway, first it will go to the routing table. In the routing table, it will be maintaining all the details, saying that, okay, this machine is available here, this machine is available here, and are you authorized to go inside it or not? So those kind of check that you can do by setting up a rule Or as I said, you can set it up as a route where this is how we should be going. So suppose if this is a machine and you have a specific IP address, those will be available here, and for this machine also will be available. So that is how, if traffic comes and says that you want to go to this machine, then based on the details that it reads, it will be directed saying that, hey, you go to the right hand side because this machine is available. And if there is a traffic which needs to come to this machine, then it comes, the routing table will have the information, and based on that it will tell you go this side. And whether you have to go or not, again the access or the rules will be specified in it. Okay, so that's how the routing table will have all the information on where exactly the traffic should be going. And once again, when you create a default VPC, that will be having a routing table attached to it. So just like how you have the internet gateway, there will be another component called as the route table, which will be attached to the internet gateway. Okay, now here if you look, when you have a VPC, in a VPC, we can have only one internet gateway. That is what I said some time back. But now, within a VPC, actually you can have multiple routing tables. So it is not mandatory that you should be having only one routing table. You can have multiple routing tables, specifically saying this is how the data should be flowing, this is where you should be going. Okay, but you cannot delete a routing table in case if it has dependencies and something is still trying to access on it. Just like how you have the internet gateway, if the resources are being used, you cannot just directly delete. The same way, if a routing table has some dependencies on some machine being routed and accessed, then you cannot try to delete this specific routing table from a VPC. Okay, so that way VPC will have the another component called as routing table, which will have all the data, so that if a machine has been requested to do some task, it will route exactly where it should go. Okay, so here if you look, this is the traffic where when it comes, it will go to the internet gateway, and then from the routing table it knows where exactly the IP address is and where it should send, and it will go, and if there is any rule that has been applied, based on that it will be filtered, and then you will be able to access or not access. So that is how it will be moving ahead. Now suppose if you do not have an internet gateway, as I said in the previous slide, without an internet gateway, what can happen? The machines can communicate with each other, but it cannot communicate to the internet because there is no connection to the internet, because the internet gateway is not available. Okay, so that's how when you have the internet gateway, then you can try to connect from the machine to the internet. Okay, so that's the difference. Clear on this? What is the internet gateway and the routing table? Okay. Now, the next component that we saw was NACL, right? Because from the internet, the data will first come to the internet gateway. From the internet gateway, it will go to the routing table, and from the routing table, it knows where exactly the machine is available and which availability zone or region it is there. It will be directed to that, and in that, the first thing that it will come across is NACL. So what exactly is NACL? So NACL stands for Network Access Control Lists. So what exactly it is? So a NACL is an optional layer of security that we can have on our VPC, where this again acts like a firewall for controlling what and all is the traffic that should flow inside and outside our subnet in the network. Okay, so just like how we will be having the firewall wherein we can say that this is the data should come inside, or you should not be able to access some site, right? So those kind of things that you will be seeing is by setting up a rule called as firewall. In the same way, now you can set up a additional rule called as NACL, wherein if you need to set up, you can set up. If not, it is not required. So that you can specify what exactly is the traffic which should be flowing inside a particular machine and what it should not be allowing. You can try to set it up using the NACL. And once again, when we create an account, you'll be getting a default VPC, right? And in the default VPC, we'll already be having a NACL which will be available, and that will be attached to whatever subnets that we are going to use within the VPC. So that's how there will be some set of standard rules that we will be having, using which when you connect to a machine, we'll be having certain options. Okay, so again, we cannot try to remove this again, because when I say NACL, it is optional. So if you want, you can try to add it. If not, you can just leave it. But if you use it, it will be just trying to act as a firewall. Okay. Now, same thing here. We saw the rule, and in that, I think I copy pasted it once again. No problem. So when you specifically look inside, now what exactly the NACL is going to do? So in the NACL, you are going to set up some rule which will be acting as a firewall, is what I said, right? Now in that, you can specify what are the data that should flow inside and outside your particular VPC or from a machine. So that way you can try to specify some kind of rules, that is inbound rules and outbound rules. Okay, so if you say inbound rules, so from the internet or from other machine, if you are trying to send or connect to a machine, or a traffic is flowing to a machine, then the inbound rules will be applying. Whereas if you have the outbound rule from your machine, if you want to connect to other machine or to the internet, these rules will be applicable. So specifically based on whether you want to allow a particular traffic inside or outside your VPC or a particular resource, then be using the inbound and the outbound rules. Okay. Now, for the default NAC, whatever that you are going to create, because whenever you are creating a VPC, you will be getting a default internet gateway, you will be getting a default routing table, as well as you will also get a default NACL. And when you have the default VPC, in that the default NACL, all the traffic will be allowed. So by default, there will be no restriction on the default NACL. So if you are creating the default VPC, then on your resources, you can connect and pass all kind of traffics. There will be no restriction. And top of that, if you want to restrict something, then you are going to set up a specific rule based on which it will be not allowing the traffic. But if not, by default in your VPC, all kind of traffics can be allowed between the machine or between the machine and the internet. Okay. Additionally, now specifically if you look, the rules whatever that you are going to write, so that rules whatever that you are going to define, we will be giving it by numbers. So you'll be saying number 1 rule, number 2 rule, and it will be going on in that way, so that when you have the rules that you are defining, then the rules will be evaluated based on the numbers that you are trying to define. So if you say I have 5 rules, then based on the rule number, first rule, second rule, third rule, it will be executing in the same order, where from the lowest to highest. So first it will execute the very first rule, then the second number rule, the third number rule. So that is how it will be executing it one by one from the lowest to the highest order. And the first rule, whatever that you are going to evaluate, applies to the type of traffic and then based on that, all the other things will be there. Now, what do you mean by exactly a rule? Now, let's say for a machine, you are saying first rule is allow the port number called 80 to be accessible to HTTP. Okay, so now this is one rule where I'm saying for a machine, if you want to access a port called 80, you can access it through the HTTP mode. Okay, now this is one rule. Now, before that, I will put one more rule wherein I will say do not allow any kind of HTTP traffic. Now, the difference here is, let's say the first rule what I've said is do not allow any HTTP traffic. And the second rule what I'm going to say is allow the HTTP traffic specifically to port 80. Now, in this case, what will happen? Even though you have you have told in the second rule where we can access the HTTP port in the 80, but on the very first rule, what is that we have said? We have said that none of the traffic should be allowed to the HTTP port. And as I said, the rules will be executed one by one in the order. So that way, when the very first rule applies, which says that none of the HTTP port should be accessible or the traffic should be accessible, so that no matter any other rule that you give here, nothing will be working, because in the first level itself, you have applied a rule to not allow anything. So that is how, based on the rule that you have given, it will always be executing from the first order. Okay, remember, that is quite important. Then, when you try to create a new set of rules, that is a new NACL, then by default, all the traffic will be denied. Again, remember, when you are creating a default VPC account, in that you will be getting one default NACL, and in that NACL, all the traffic will be allowed. Now, if we want, additionally, we can create one more NACL or one more set of rules, and in that what will happen? By default, all the traffic will be denied. So that's the difference. So rather than having the default VPC, and in that VPC, if you want to have a particular rule, what you can do is on top of it, you can create a new NACL, so that in that it will be trying to deny all the traffic by default. So the rule that you are going to choose is will tell what exactly that you want to allow inside it. So based on that, only those traffics will be allowed. Okay, so this is how it will be working. Clear? What exactly is a NACL? Now, in the VPC, there was one more component that I was talking, that is subnet, which is also called as subnetwork. So what is the exact need of subnet? In fact, we will be talking about the subnet even in our infrastructure, or if you go to an organization, you'll be talking about this. So what exactly is this subnet? So when you see, subnet is actually a part of your network where it includes all the specific resources or the computer in a specific location. So just like in our organization, you'll be having different floors, or you can have different buildings within the campus. So that way, now each one of them can be put or called as a separate subsection. So within the network, if you have segregations wherein you are grouping certain machines, and then that grouping can be called as a network. That is the subnetwork. Okay. Now, if you try to compare the same thing with our home network, or the analogy for that, now if the ISP, that is the internet service provider, being a network, then our home network can be considered as a subnet of our ISP. That means now whatever the internet service provider who is giving it, it is a complete network. So that is how no matter from where you are, you can access everything over the internet. But specifically, if you consider our home will have a group of machines inside it, and it is part of that global internet, right? So that is how we can consider our home again as a separate subnet, because we have a specific subnetwork where all the machines in our home can be connected only between it and not across it. Okay, so that is how subnet is nothing but a part of your network where you can be grouping certain things together. Once again, when we create a VPC, then it will be spanning on all the availability zone in the region. So when you say a VPC is not only for a particular availability zone. It will be across all the availability zones that we have in the AWS, so that you can access all of them within our private network. And based on our need, we can try to create or add one or more subnets in each of the availability zone. So now, where exactly the machines are there? The machines are available in the availability zone specifically. So now what we can do is, on a particular availability zone, there are going to be many machines inside it. So we can particularly group them using the subnet, and based on our requirement in that availability zone, where exactly you want to use or which subnet you want to use within that particular availability zone. So that is how you can group particular machines. Okay, and when I say that you have a subnetwork or a subnet, then each subnet must reside entirely within one availability zone. Because let's take an organization. In an organization, you are going to create a subnetwork for a main network. Now, again, this will not be on different network zones. So let's say you have a office in India, you have an office in US. Now, for the Indian office, they will be creating one data center, and there will be one data center which will be available in the US. Again, the network will be separate, because if you want to access everything within one data center in India, you can access everything. But within the India itself, they might be having different office locations. So let's say we have one office in Bangalore and there's one office in Hyderabad. Then what will happen? Now, for each of them, they will be creating a sub network on the main network, so that whatever machines that you want, you will be putting them under one sub network. But when I say that you are having a private or a sub network for Hyderabad and you are having a sub network in Bangalore, now where exactly this is going to be available? It will be available on that data center which is in India, right? You cannot say that I can have one sub network which will be half in India and half in the US. No, if you say a particular subnetwork, it has to be part of that main or private network. So in that way, where is all the machines which will be storing? Instead of the data centers physically in the AWS, we call it as availability zone. So that way, everything will be stored in the particular availability zone only. So a subnet will be part of the availability zone. Okay, it cannot be across two. And then when you try to create a default VPC, that is whenever we create an account in AWS, you'll be getting a VPC, right? Now in that, just like all the others, you will also be having a subnet created by default. So when you create a VPC, you're going to get an internet gateway, routing table, default NACL, as well as a particular subnet. So all those things is what we are going to get together. Okay. Clear so far? Now, let me stop it. If not, it might be looking confusing. Clear so far on what is that we saw? So, quickly, if you just try to recall. So, on our home, what is that we are going to have? We are going to have the network, where in the network we'll be having modem, router or switch and firewall. Whereas if you take the same thing in AWS, it will be replaced with the internet gateway, routing table, NACL, and the specific machines. So in this now, The internet gateway is one component using which we will be able to connect from the machine to the internet. And again, when you create a account, you will be getting a default VPC, and along with it, you will also get a internet gateway, and you will also get a default routing table and a default NACL. And as part of this, one subnet will also be getting it. And then the routing table will have all the details specific to where you have to route or direct the traffic. That is, all the details about the IP address of the machine will be there. So from the internet, if you say connect to this machine, then from the internet gateway, it will come to the routing table, and that will be directed specific to an availability zone on which the machine is there. Wherein the NACL is the set of rule, just like how we have firewall. We will specify what kind of traffic that you want to allow, wherein whether you want to allow it inside the machine or from the machine outside to the internet. So you will be specifying it using the inbound and the outbound rule. And finally, if needed, we can create a sub network by grouping certain machines within a VPC. And for that, if you create a subnet, that has to be part of one availability zone. You cannot say that there will be one subnet which is going to connect to different availability zones. Okay.